Because now, for the first time in human history, we are now separating human capital from the human. Think about it. The human capital is now part of an algorithm. And that means that we can scale the human capital like never before. Welcome to this wonderful city which I love. I'm going to dive deep right away, and my presentation will be about 10 messages. I also have an opportunity to speak with some of you in more detail later this afternoon. I've studied over a decade many companies, large companies, startups. I've studied government organizations. You might find some familiar names here. My first message to the audience here is, despite what you might read in the newspapers or hear in the podcasts, remote work is very much here to stay. And everything I say, I'm going to back it up with data because I'm an academic, I'm not a journalist. And so let's look at the data together very quickly. This is a survey conducted by economists from Stanford. And what this tells us is that the percentage of remote days in the economy has been very stable. It's about 25% of all worker days. But this is US data, and similar data exists for many Western countries. It used to be 5% of all worker days before the pandemic. So that's gone from 5% to 25%. But as academics, we are very skeptical. We don't settle on a question unless we look at the data from at least 3 sources. So the second source is about swipe cards. And Office swipe cards also show the same pattern, very stable, extremely stable, around 25%. And the third source, we also collected data on cell phone and where the cell phones are being used during office hours. Again, the same pattern. So 3 sources all point out to the same pattern that 25% days are being done remotely. So why do we read about only the Amazon and the Dell stories and not about the Glassdoor stories? Glassdoor shut down all its offices in the US. And also about the European Central Bank story, which I'll come to in a minute, which is now allowed for work from anywhere. The second message many of you might have come to this conference with is, what about RTOs, return to office? And academics have looked at that, and the summary message you can tell your board, your CEO, is that RTOs do not work. RTOs are not effective. So why do I say that? The data is very clear. RTOs, and this is a study done by researchers at the University of Pittsburgh. What they find is RTOs, the left graphic, has no positive impact on stock prices. No positive. Neither a negative, but no positive. So what is the impact on? RTOs have a very strong effect on employee turnover, on attrition. About 10% are following the RTO. And that number is about 13% for women. Okay? So 10% on average, 13% for women. So in my opinion, RTOs have been a tool of turnover, of voluntary turnover. You announce an RTO, 10% of the company leaves, you don't pay full benefits. It's not a tool of productivity, no matter whatever people say. The evidence is extremely clear. So with those 2 basic facts established, let me jump into the meat of what I study. And by the way, even in the US government, they've been forced to backtrack very quietly on the RTOs. So this is the US Food and Drug Administration, and they have lost their star scientists, and despite Elon Musk, they were able to sneak in a reversal on their RTO policy because talent was bleeding. The third thing I'm going to mention, and this is at the heart of my presentation and my work, I study work from anywhere, okay? And I'm going to make this very clear at the onset. Work from anywhere is not the same as work from home. Work from anywhere is not the same as work from home. And let me make that point using this picture. So work from home, we all know. Work from anywhere looks like this, this figure on the right. This is a map showing where the US patent examiners were living in 2015 when the patent office said you can go and live anywhere in the US. So work from anywhere is the choice of giving the employee the choice to live where they want to live, choosing the city, the town, the state, and sometimes even the country where people want to live. So work from anywhere is a work arrangement which lets people choose where they want to live. And I'm going to argue, and once they choose that place, the city, the town, they can work from home. They can work from a co-working space. So some of you might know the Tulsa Remote program, right? Tulsa, I'm going to talk about it later as well. Tulsa Remote is a very successful program in the US to attract remote workers to the city of Tulsa. They don't work from home. They work from a co-working space called 36 Degrees North. And I'm going to argue that work from anywhere is the talent strategy of the future. To every CHRO in the room, based on a decade of research, this is probably my most core insight. You cannot ignore work from anywhere if you are fighting the war for talent. So let me go a little deeper into this. It's pretty intuitive why work from anywhere is great for workers, okay? So think about a couple with a dual career situation. Now, every time one of the spouses gets a promotion or gets a new opportunity, the other spouse may not want to relocate from where they're living to the new city, from London to Paris. Work from anywhere solves that problem. You might have aging parents like I do. My dad is 86. And you might have caring responsibilities. And if the company sends you far, far away from where your dad and mom lives, that's a problem. Work from anywhere solves that. You might like the mountains. Work from anywhere lets you live near the mountains. You might love the ocean. Work from anywhere lets you live near the ocean. But then the question is, what's the business case for the company? Why should your board allow you to implement work from anywhere? And the business case is very simple. 4 things. There could be productivity gains, and I'm going to show you some data in a minute. You're converting real estate from a fixed cost to a variable cost. And mention this to your CFO. Why do you want to invest in a building? Why do you want to invest in a 30-year lease? Why not rent office space when people and teams need that office space? You are converting real estate into a utility. CFOs love that argument. But the heart of the business case is that work from anywhere allows each one of your companies to hire from anywhere. Now, you're not constrained to hiring from one city or one region. You can hire from multiple cities, all of the country, neighboring countries, and sometimes even all around the world. So it is about talent access, which leads to more diverse talent, because if you start hiring from more regions or more countries, you get more diverse workers. And my research also indicates that that leads to more employee loyalty and people stay longer. Attrition goes down. So work from anywhere at its heart is a talent strategy that opens up the labor market for each one of your organizations. Quick point of that. So there is a whole class of startups, and some of them are now pretty large. So Deal is about 13,000 employees now. They don't have any offices, and they have implemented work from anywhere. So case in point, Zapier. How many of you have heard about Zapier? Just a quick show of hands. So it's a startup with about 800 people. Zapier in the olden days would have been based in Silicon Valley, would have been competing for talent against Google and Facebook. But now Zapier is all remote, no offices, and is able to hire from 32 countries. And there are employer-on-record companies, EORs, and I'm going to talk about that in the masterclass, that will allow you to hire from all over the world. So open up the labor market. That's one of the big benefits of work from anywhere. What about productivity? So we studied that very, very carefully in the patent office, and we found productivity went up 4%. And you would ask, why would people become more productive if they're allowed to live where they want to live? And I'll tell you one story. So there was a woman in the patent office, and she said, Raj, for the first time, because I moved from Alexandria, Virginia, which is close to Washington, D.C., I moved to my hometown, where it's way cheaper. I'm able to afford childcare. And you can imagine why affording childcare for this woman would make her more productive. So if people are able to choose geography that works for them, it makes them more productive. That's the simple message of the productivity story. Now, I'm going to quickly show this example because we are in Portugal. Work from anywhere is not just a tech phenomena. The European Central Bank recently passed a policy saying 110 days of work from anywhere for every ECB banker. The reason they did this, and it's on record, this allows them to compete against Deutsche Bank and the large private banks. One of the world's most reputed law firms, they've been rated the most feared law firm in the US 3 times in a row. They have a work from anywhere policy. And their policy is we want to invite the best litigators to join our firm wherever their desks are. So this is happening in banking. Every time people talk about the JP Morgan Chase example, talk about the European Central Bank example to them. Now, the next message I'm going to focus on is in the book I've just written, and it's published, and I know some of you will get a copy. One of the things I've tried to do is I've tried to open our imagination, based on the prior speaker, that work from anywhere is possible within a hybrid setup, okay? So what most people call hybrid, I call it weekly hybrid. And I'm going to argue that there are at least 2 more forms of hybrid, one that I call monthly hybrid, and the other that I call quarterly hybrid, which allow for work from anywhere. But the first question, many of you in the room might have this question about, Raj, how many days should we be in person, okay? And if you talk to the person next to you, there are many, many opinions, but what we need is good scientific data. So we actually ran an experiment with HR workers. What we did is for 9 weeks, we randomized who gets to work remotely and who gets to work in person. For 9 weeks, every day, we ran a lottery. And then at the end of 9 weeks, we measured a bunch of outcomes. What we found is that 25 to 40% days in person was optimum. 25 to 40% was better than more days in person, also better than less days in person, across a range of outcomes. Employee satisfaction, their happiness, their productivity, you name it. And I'm not going to claim this is the answer for all of your organizations. You can run your own experiments and figure out what's the sweet spot. But let's say 25%. Let's just accept that that's the number. Now think about this. 25% can be organized in many ways. It could be a weekly 25%. You could say, come 1 day every week. That's 25%. It could also mean a whole week every month. That's 25%. That is what I call monthly hybrid. It could mean 2 weeks in person every 2 months. That's what I call quarterly hybrid. So I'm going to argue that you need to open your imagination to 2 dimensions. Where do teams meet? The venue. The venue doesn't have to be always the downtown office. I'm working with a Cisco sales team that is meeting at the end of sales conferences, because all of them go to the sales conference and they just stay back for a couple of days and they do their team meetings. But also the frequency of meeting. So if you allow the team to work from anywhere for 3 weeks, and then you come together in London for a week, then you can live anywhere in Europe. If you let the team live anywhere in the world and come together once a quarter for an offsite, then you have global work from anywhere. So I would say let the teams choose what works for them. This should be a team by team by team solution. There should not be a top-down mandate. Each team should decide whether they are practicing weekly, monthly, or quarterly hybrid. And in the book, what I do is I then say, based on this journey from weekly to monthly to quarterly hybrid, you have to master some management practices in each step. And in the masterclass, I'm going to go through some of that detail. So this also means that the office can be at the offsite. This can be our new office. Or the office architecture can be very different from what cubicles and corner offices looked like. I actually studied one of these offsites, okay? And I think you'll find this very interesting. What I found was this whole discussion between office or offsite is actually not the debate we should be asking. That's not the question. The question should be, how do we do in-person better? How do we do in-person better should be the question every CHRO should ask. Because today we're not doing in-person well. Even in the weekly hybrid, some members of the team are going on Monday, Tuesday, and some are going on Thursday, Friday. The whole team is not together. Now, I'm going to point out to another really interesting, or two actually, sources of problems of in-person. And I'm going to argue that as CHROs, your job has to be engineering serendipity. It cannot be left to people to design in-person events. And I'll tell you why. So when we come to in-person events like this, or events in the office, there is a very subconscious bias that all of us experience. Does anyone see that bias in this picture? Do you see the bias? Do you agree that this is the bias that happens in in-person events? You know, I've recently gone to my kids' school parent-teacher meetings, and I see exactly the same thing. I see this in the playground. I see this everywhere. That we tend to connect with people who look just like us. So men with men, women with women, and also ethnic subgroups. So sociologists have called this homophily. Homophily. That's what this is. And we all have this bias of homophily. So when we studied the Zapier retreat, we found, yes, they made new connections, but they made new connections with people just like them. There was one interesting way in which this bias was broken. And that is when Zapier employees traveled from the airport to the retreat in the same taxi ride. Because if you're sitting in the back of a taxi, it doesn't matter who's next to you, it seems okay to start a conversation and make a new connection. That is what engineering serendipity is. And I'm going to not tell you how to engineer serendipity in organizations, but I'm going to urge all of you to think about how to make in-person better so that we all have more diverse set of ties. One more problem. All these CEOs and some of your CEOs might be talking about water coolers, right? Does that conversation happen in your companies? What about the water cooler? We used to have fun conversations in the water cooler, right? Now, fun fact, when I talk to young people, they say, what is a water cooler? I carry my water in my water bottle, right? Anyway, but here's the reality of water cooler conversations. So an economist from MIT studied this in the 1970s. And what he finds is that in the office, people tend to talk to other people who are within 25 meters of where you are sitting. 25 meters, that's it. So it's the same 5, 7, 8 people every day. If 2 employees are sitting on different floors, very less likely. If you're in different buildings of the same campus, forget about a water cooler conversation. So what this means is we are having siloed in-person conversations. Interns with interns, sales with sales, HR with HR, right? That's what we have. We have the same 5, 7, 8 office friends. Now, this leads to bias because no intern ever goes to the C-suite, knocks the door of the CEO, and says, let's have a water cooler conversation. But you can do that virtually, right? So in an experiment, we paired up very senior leaders at a bank with interns, and we found that having even brief conversations with senior leaders led to higher productivity for these interns. And that's the blue bar. It was positive. The effect was even stronger if the intern had the same gender and the same ethnicity as the senior leader. So homophily was in play on Zoom as well, not only in person. And I've called this virtual water coolers. So all of you in your organizations, and virtual water coolers are not happy Zoom hours, which I don't like, because the same extroverts come to these Zoom happy hours. Virtual water coolers are randomized interactions between very senior people and new employees or younger employees. So I'm going to have like 2 or 3 more messages, and hopefully I'm doing okay on time. One of the reasons I am extremely excited about work from anywhere, as you can imagine, is work from anywhere corrects a big societal problem. So what is the societal problem? For decades, all around the world, people living in small towns, you grew up. How many of us are from small towns? Grew up in a small town. So you will absolutely understand where I'm coming. You grow up in a small town, you finish high school, and then what do? You leave for a college somewhere, you get a job, you marry, you start a family, and you never come back, right? So for decades, our smaller towns, our rural communities have lost talent. There's been extreme brain drain. And I see work from anywhere as a solution to that problem. Because now with work from anywhere, smaller towns are cheaper towns. Younger people would like to live there because cost of living is lower. And so talent can flow back to smaller towns. And so I think there might be a more equitable distribution of talent living across the large cities and the smaller towns. And I'll show you this map. This is a map of the US. Every dot is a smaller town that has an incentive policy for remote workers. They're paying remote workers to go and live in their smaller towns. There are about 55 smaller towns in the US that will pay you money if you are a remote worker and you go and live there. And they have understood that for decades, they have tried to pay companies to come and set up an office or set up a factory. It's not worked. So why pay money to companies? Let's pay money directly to remote workers. And I studied one of these programs for years now, the Tulsa Remote Program. So Tulsa is a small city in Oklahoma, about 1 million people. They will pay you $10,000 to go and live there for a year, at least a year. You have to live there for a year, then you get $10,000. And they were expecting 50 people to come. They've got 4,000 remote workers to move to Tulsa. And these people are now volunteering in the local community. They are starting new businesses in Tulsa. And so I have a study, and I know you cannot see the details, but I'm happy to talk about this offline. Tulsa is now thriving because of these new remote workers. And globally, digital nomads has become a real thing. I just came from Madeira. Such a beautiful place, right? And Madeira has now attracted 20,000 digital nomads. 20,000 new workers have flown through this beautiful island of Madeira, and they're now thinking about how we can use this to build the economy of Madeira. So, in the final part of my talk, I'm going to talk about AI, because every conference now is about AI, and AI is like the thing that we all are, and I've been studying AI for years. So on AI, I'm going to make 2 points, all related to work from anywhere. The first point is AI is going to make work from anywhere possible in blue-collar jobs, okay? Because for years and years and years, people used to ask me, Raj, what about blue-collar jobs? Is work from anywhere, is remote work only for people with computers who can work from a desk? And the answer is no. Now with digital twins, blue-collar workers, doctors, nurses can work from anywhere. So let me explain what I mean here. This is an idea that's been around for years now. I don't know why people haven't talked about this idea a lot. it is much more real than the metaverse, okay? And this is the idea of digital twins. So what is a digital twin? You have a physical operation. It could be a plant, a factory, a warehouse, an airport, a hospital ward. You put sensors all along the operation. And I'm going to show you some examples. You collect the data on the cloud in real time. So you have a minute-by-minute idea of how the operation is doing. And then you have AI algorithms predicting how to run this operation. Once you have that digital twin, now workers do not need to be in the factory, do not need to be in the ward, do not need to be in the airport. They can work from anywhere. So 3 examples, all from my research. This is a Unilever plant in Brazil, okay? It makes detergents. So this particular tower makes detergents. They put sensors along the entire tower, and on the day of the pilot, this whole factory was run from miles away on the kitchen table of the operator on a computer. So this is the Unilever example from Brazil. Closer to Europe, or actually in Europe, this is a Turkish power generation company called Enerjisa Üretim. They had a big HR problem. So Enerjisa Üretim has 20 power plants all over Turkey, but in the mountains of Turkey, the small villages of Turkey, and their engineers and technicians don't want to go and live there. Everyone wants to live in Istanbul. So they created a digital twin headquarters in Istanbul, one room just like this. And from that room now they run 20 power plants. Okay? So all of their technicians and engineers have moved to Istanbul. The only people left behind are the maintenance people. And the previous speaker talked about business model innovation. This is a great example of business model innovation, because once they figured this out, they are now selling digital twin licenses to Qatari and Saudi power plants. Earlier, they were selling power to the grid. Now they are selling technological licenses. They've become a tech company. And the final example on digital twins, this is the New York Hospital Intensive Care Unit, the ICU. They have created an electronic version of it, where the sensors on the patients get recorded on the cloud in real time, and the doctors are sitting at home observing which patient needs attention. So all the hospitals in New York now have an electronic ICU. And the doctors and nurses, in many cases, are not in the hospital. And my student actually studied this and found that the eICU led to patient outcomes improving for most patients, except for the healthiest patients and the sickest patients. And then my student went to the doctors and said, why do we see this? Why do we see the patient improvement for everyone but the healthiest and the least healthiest? And the answer was, when the patient is a screen, we can prioritize. The healthiest patients don't need our attention. The most sick patients, God bless them, but even if we spend the whole day with them, they won't improve. So we can focus on the middle, which can actually lead to better outcomes. And that's what we observe. But here's the point: across factories, across airports, across farmlands, across hospitals, across power plants, digital twins are now a reality. And the final point in my last minute is a topic that I'm extremely excited about. So one of the many implications of Gen AI, and this is the implication I'm personally most excited about, is that my prediction is, and the day this happens, you have to remember to say that you heard this first here, right? My prediction is, in a couple of years, each one of us, every one of us in the room, will have a personal bot. We'll have a personal bot that can communicate just like us. It's not a generic bot. It's going to be a personal bot. And my prediction is this will happen in 2-3 years, and this will usher the next wave of work from anywhere. So what do I mean? So a personal bot is a bot that can write answers or draft emails just like we write answers. So you have to not only train the content, but also the communication style. So, some of us sign off our emails saying best regards, right? Some of us say warm regards. Some of us say best. So the bot needs to know exactly how we write English. So we created a personal bot for Wade Foster. Wade Foster is the CEO of Zapier. And we ran an experiment in Wade's company where employees asked questions, and the answer came from either the human Wade or the bot Wade. Everyone with me about the experiment? And what we found is the bot did really, really good. People, the employees of Wade, could only detect the source, the human or the bot, correctly 59% times, which is just better than flipping a coin. Flipping a coin, you can get the answer 50%. 59%. So today's Gen AI technology, we can create a bot from any of you that could answer your emails. Think about that. Or go to meetings. And actually, that's what's another friend of mine, Sam Liang, he's the CEO of Otter. He has now created a Sam bot. And he plans to send Sam bot to meetings. So why is this going to be transformational for work from anywhere? Because now, for the first time in human history, we are now separating human capital from the human. Think about it. The human capital is now part of an algorithm. And that means that we can scale the human capital like never before. Once you have a Sam bot or a Wade bot or a Michelle bot or a Gary bot, you can send that bot to 3 meetings at the same time. That bot can participate in meetings across any time zones. There is no work-life balance issues, right? So this could really usher a new wave of work from anywhere. Of course, I'm a little bit, we have to sort out a bunch of complications, which I'll talk about in the master class. But let me mention one huge complication. There's going to be a huge, huge debate coming down the pike, okay? And again, you heard it first here. The debate is, who owns the bot? Is it the company or is it the worker? So today I'm at Harvard, and if Harvard made a bot for me, if I left Harvard tomorrow, can Harvard continue to use my bot in the classroom? Does Harvard pay me royalties for that? So these questions will come up in the courts, in company boardrooms, and it'll be fun to watch. So this is my new book. This is the QR code. I look forward to seeing some of you in the masterclass. Thank you so much again.